In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this slider with multiple images using the power of animation and triggers in PowerPoint. Let's begin. To start off, I prepared some images and buttons. You can download the file using link in the description or use your own images. We should start by renaming all of our objects. To do this, let's open the selection pane, press Home, Arrange, Selection pane. In the selection pane, let's select each object and give it a proper name. Then we should also reorder our objects so that the first one stays on top and the last one is at the bottom. This will help in future. Doing the same with our buttons. Now we can start adding triggers and animations. Let's open the Animation tab. I am changing the ribbon setting as we are going to use it a lot. Before we begin creating the slider, let me demonstrate the principles behind my method. If you already know a lot about triggers, you can skip ahead. Let's create a shape. We will use it as a trigger. Let's make a simple appear animation. After we add an animation to an object, we have the option to set trigger for it. In this example, I want our image to play its animation when the red trigger is clicked. That's how it works. To expand on trigger usage, let's give our trigger a proper name and make a duplicate. I will give it a distinct color and remove border. Now let's make a disappear animation for our image that will be triggered by our duplicate shape. Select the animation in the Animation tab and add trigger. Now we can use both trigger objects to switch between states for our image. Now we will turn those to triggers into one button, an on-off switch. To achieve it, we will make it so the second trigger only appears after the first one was clicked, by adding appear animation to the shape and moving it under the first trigger. Make sure to set all animations to start with previous. First part done. After the image appears, there is no point in making it appear again, so we should hide the first trigger once it was used. We should add 2 more animations, so that each shape, when clicked, could hide itself and reveal the other one. As always, don't forget to set everything to start with previous. It's important that only one shape is visible at the same time. If it's not visible, it's not clickable. Let's move our shape triggers on top of each other to make it into one button. Now with each click, the button updates and we can switch our image on and off infinitely. Technically, we didn't create a switch. These are 2 buttons that control each other, but that's the only way we can create something like this in PowerPoint. We can now delete all animations and start making our slider. Before we make more triggers, we should do the math. Triggers in PowerPoint are not programmable and can do only one thing when clicked. To create an on-off switch, we needed 2 triggers. If we want to make a slider with these 4 images, we will need a trigger for each action the slider can perform. Switching from image number 1 to image number 2 is one action. Switching back to image number 1 is another action, and so on. In the end, we will have 8 possible actions, so we need to create 8 trigger objects. To avoid further confusion, I will rename each trigger object to represent its action. For example, this object, when clicked, should change image from image number 1 to image number 2. I will name it square brackets 1, hyphen, square brackets 2. Then I will repeat it with other trigger objects and reorder them. All the green squares are for moving slider forward, so the number would go up with the exception of the final object that returns us to image number 1. All the red squares are for moving slider back, so the numbers should go down with the exception of the first object that shows image number 4. Now we can start adding animations, but once again, let me explain the mechanics before we continue. We want only two triggers to be visible at the same time, one to go to previous image and one to go the next. Each trigger we created, when clicked, should do at least 4 actions. Hide itself, hide the other trigger for the currently shown image, and reveal the new triggers. I will reorder things a little bit more. And now, let's start working on the first trigger, 1 to 2. We begin by adding appear animation to object 2 to 1 and 2 to 3. Make sure to set all animations to start with previous. Select the trigger 1 to 2. Let's see how it works. The objects are now hidden when the slide is open and will appear when we click our trigger. Nice. With our next step, we are going to add animations to hide trigger 1 to 2 and 1 to 4, as they should not be visible when we change image from number 1 to number 2. Let's add disappear animation for both. We are using appear and disappear animations because they don't have duration time or unnecessary settings. They will not be visible in the final product anyway, so don't bother choosing any other animation. Now our first trigger is complete. Let's see it in action. Nice. Now let's make our second trigger that will be able to revert things to its original state. Let's create the opposite of each animation currently created and assign them to the trigger 2 to 1. That looks nice. All we have to do is to repeat the process 6 more times. The way we name each trigger object will help us significantly. The first number we see in the trigger name should match the first numbers of objects we hide with disappear animation. The second number we see on the trigger name should match the first number of objects we show with appear animation. So, the process is: select 2 objects that the trigger should reveal and add appear animations. Select 2 objects that the trigger should hide and add disappear animations. Unfortunately, there is no way to directly copy animations in PowerPoint other than Animation Painter, but it can only copy animations from one object to another. Make sure to choose Start with Previous. Assign the trigger. Repeat until there are 8 triggers. I will show you the whole process so you can follow along. Here I made a mistake. Fortunately, it is easy to find a problem if we use convenient names. The first number we see in the trigger name should match the first numbers of objects we hide with disappear animation. The second number we see on the trigger name should match the first number of objects we show with appear animation. Now everything works smoothly. We are almost done. Just need to add triggers for changing between number 1 and number 4. And here we go, the buttons are now fully functional. The next thing to do is to add animations to our images. Some more math. Each time we press a button, 2 images should be animated, one with disappearing animation and the other with appearing. There will always be 2 triggers to make image appear and 2 triggers to make it disappear. So we need a total of 4 animations for each of our images. After some consideration, I decided that peek in and peek out are the best built-in animations in PowerPoint to mimic the slider effect, so I'm going to use them. Starting with peek out animation, let's change the direction setting so that animation feels like it's a slider. Now let's add another peek out with a different direction. And peeking with different directions too. Adjust the animation speed to your liking now, as we are going to copy-paste these animations to other images. Find the animation painter and use it to copy animations to each image. This tool doesn't work with animations and triggers, so we are doing it now before assigning triggers. The only thing left to do now is to assign image animations to triggers. This might be tricky as we can't see which direction is chosen for which animation, so we are going through some tedious work. We will once again rely on our name system to determine the right place for animation. After some testing, I created the rule. For each trigger associated with going forward, there should be 2 image animations with left direction selected. For example, trigger 1 to 2 should have picture 1, disappear from right to left, and picture 2, appear from right to left. It's me from the future. I came up with this order to help you populate the triggers. All the top animations are going from right to left. All the bottom animations are going from left to right. Based on color of the animation and this rule, you will be able to copy this sequence. After this, you can select pairs of animations by clicking on one of them and then shift-clicking on the next one. Drag pairs of animations to populate triggers like shown on the screen. You can determine where to drag the pair by looking at numbers. Number of the first picture in pair is the same as the first in the name of the trigger, same for the second one. After the first half is done, make sure that all animations that were not distributed yet have the same direction selected. If not, try making the sequence again. Keep in mind that I tell you all that for educational purposes. If you just want to copy the slider, you can download it using the link in the description. Now both images and triggers work correctly. It's time to see the final result of our work. I aligned all images both horizontally and vertically and did the same with triggers, but kept them split into groups. The effect is working correctly. Now let's just make the layout more appealing. I am moving our button shapes to the top temporarily to be able to make the slide pretty. You will soon see what problems it creates. Important notice: do not group objects. PowerPoint counts groups as individual objects and cannot allow animations for some parts of the group. Here I created a group and it broke everything, so I will revert changes with Ctrl+Z. Still, our animations don't work now. That is because PowerPoint only allows you to click objects that are currently on top. Our trigger objects are below the button shapes, so we have to find a workaround. First, let's send our buttons all the way to the bottom. Then, using the selection pane, we can select all of our trigger objects by clicking on all of them while holding Control. After all are selected, we can modify them all at once. We don't want to see these objects, we only want to see our buttons, so let's try making them invisible by changing fill. Doesn't work. That is because if the shape has no fill and no outline, PowerPoint thinks it doesn't exist and can't be clicked. However, this only applies if the object has no fill. Let me use Ctrl-Z to return the fill and try something different. We can press this little icon in the Shape Styles tab to open Format pane. Here we can determine the transparency of our fill color. Even if transparency is set to 100, this doesn't lead to PowerPoint thinking the object doesn't exist. So we will make our trigger objects invisible, but still clickable. It works perfectly. Now I will spend some time making the slide prettier. As we can't group the objects, I'm using extra shapes for perfect alignment. This is the final result. Nice. As the final touch, I'm going to add animation to the buttons, so whenever we click a trigger, the button will indicate it being clicked. I created 4 animations for one button and copied them to another, then distributed animations to each of 8 triggers. This is the final result. We have fully controllable and easily customizable slider inside just one slide in PowerPoint. Leave a like if you found this tutorial helpful. Subscribe so that you don't miss future tutorials. Have a nice day.